And some of you that are seasons are going to find this class maybe a little repetitive because I'm going to go over everything today. Never hurts to have a little refresher at what you're doing, correct? So we're going to get started. If you have questions, just please raise your hand. You do not have to wait until the end, like we did at my other sessions. Okay. First of all, we're going to go over a KW Trilegs listing cover packet. So you'll see your first document is the listing cover sheet. This is sort of a template. It's also where we get our information for your seller. I have to have a way to get a hold of your seller in case something should happen to you. You're out of town. You're off on family business, maternity leave, whatever the case may be.
Hit by a bus.
What?
Hit by a bus.
Hit by a bus, yeah. Whatever the case may be, I need to be able to contact that seller. So this is your template as well as our contact information for admin to contact the seller, okay? In the command file, you will have your files, and when you open up your files and pick whatever file you are going to be working in, whatever type of file, it will also have listed required documents. Those documents are non-negotiable. They are required for every listing because it's a KW listing. Some of those are listed, most of those are listed on here, but you'll also have that. But this should be the first document you load. This is also where contract compliance keeps their notes in the command files. So yes, this document is important. It should be first. Thank you. The next thing that you will have is a Missouri broker disclosure form. You should be carrying these in your car. Whenever you talk to anybody about real estate, you should be able to hand them one of these and explain what this form is all about and what it says. It tells all about the different types of agency available in the state of Missouri. The second page you will see are the types of agency that Keller Williams Trilegs participates in. Okay? And then you fill it out with your name. At this point in time, I do not require these to be initialed or signed and part of your file. I do have them initial and or signed, and it is part of my file. It's just a cover your butt thing. That way I can prove that not only did I give one of these to them at first meeting, when we got ready to do paperwork or whatever, they also signed that I had told them about this. Okay? The next document we're going to be looking at is the seller's agency listing a contract and exclusive right to sell. There are several other documents in your forms library for whichever library you are using. These are the most used forms. Okay, these are the ones that you're going to likely work with. Probably about 85 to 90% of the time, these are the forms that you would use on a daily or however often basis. Your seller's agency listing contract exclusive right to sell. This has changed. The first of August 1st was a change, I guess, end of July it changed. This has changed a little bit. It went from, I think, 7 pages to 9. And that's because the font and spacing is bigger, so it's easier to read. You don't have to get out a magnifying glass to look at it. And just like I have the document filled out, I have most of it filled out, kind of like a template. Agents will usually keep this and then go by it, kind of use it as a guide for when they're filling out documents until they get used to filling them all out. Otherwise, you can usually always set up a template in your library and fill out the things that never change. Section 1 will be your seller's name. When you get a call to go list a property, don't just hop in that car and run over to that property. Go ahead and do some research. First place I go is the MLS. Is it active now? Has it ever been listed before? You'll get some information off of the MLS. Do not copy that information though, because we don't know how accurate or correct that previous listing agent was. Okay? But it will give you some information. It will, then the second place you go is the county website. You're going to pull up that property in whatever county website it's in. Okay? That will tell you how they hold title to the property. You want this document filled out exactly how they hold title. If they hold title in a trust, if they hold title in an LLC, if they hold title in their personal names, however, that's how this has to be filled out. Okay? Line 3 is always going to be Keller Williams Tri-Lakes. And that's the only name that should ever be on that line. Line 5, of course, is the 911 property address. Line 7 is the expiration date. I don't care when that expiration date is, but it does have to have an expiration date. Line 8 is the sale price. You'll see it looks a little bit different than the listing now than it did before. And then 10, that's for any special terms. Sometimes, not very often, you may have a seller that has to do some owner financing, or they're going to do a lease purchase for a little while. They may have an investment property that they just can't sell outright right away. There's all kinds of different reasons that there may be any special terms. Line 12, legal description. Sometimes you'll have to get a copy of the deed from the title company and attach that as a legal description. If it's a lengthy legal description, if it's just a lot and block, you can always put that set in special agreements. But if you check that box, make sure you attach that legal description. If you check it and it's not attached, you will get it sent back and we'll be asking for it. If you don't need to attach one, don't check it. Okay, now we're going to go down to the broker compensation. And big and bold, they've added the amount or rate of broker compensation, including shared compensation, is not set by law and is negotiable. Okay, Keller Williams is a full service company. Our rate is 6%. As a brokerage and a company, we can set our rate. Okay? You will have to have some conversations with your sellers. Apparently, sellers and buyers know more about the lawsuit settlement than we do. They have been listening to the news and they know all about it, and it's illegal to offer compensation. We don't have to pay 6% anymore. Blah, 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 blah. The list goes on and on. I've heard, I don't know how many different ones. As a matter of fact, I gave up a $635,000 listing on Monday. All over compensation. They just kept trying to beat it down, and I have decided if I have a seller that is not willing to offer a buyer, broker, co-op compensation, I don't want that listing. Not unless I have the buyer in my pocket ready to purchase. Otherwise, I'm not going to waste my time nor my advertising money on that listing. Okay? Again, Keller Williams Tri-Lakes is a 6% company. We are a full service company. The amount that you share for co-broke, you can talk to your seller about that, and the conversation could go something like, Mr. Seller, if we don't offer a buyer broker compensation, we're knocking 85 to 90% of the buyers in the market out of the market. They won't be able to qualify to buy your house. The buyer has to save up for so many other things. And with the USDA, FHA, VA, all different kinds of loan programs, they just won't have enough money to pay a buyer broker compensation. Buyers brokers are not going to work for free. And you're taking your property from a buyer pool of this much to this much by offering a compensation. You need to have those conversations. And again, it's up to you what you want to do about that, but I've chosen not to take listings that are not going to offer anything. Will I take a listing that's a little bit less? Depends on the price of that listing. Obviously, if you're taking a $700,000 listing, you may have to drop that down a little bit. I agree, 6% is a lot, but if you can get it, get it. If you can, you can negotiate that a little bit, but I'm not going to take listings that are going to offer nothing. Okay? Your broker compensation, line 23, retainer fee. That used to be a flat fee, I think it was not. And that's just, okay, like an attorney. You go to see an attorney and you pay them a retainer fee. It's going to cost you $500 to hire me for your services. Okay? So you can charge a retainer fee if you'd like. And I think we're going to see more and more of those, especially on the buyer agreement side. It's not necessarily the seller, but the buyer agreement. Line 33, do not forget to check these boxes. We're seeing a lot of boxes unchecked. Okay.
But in number 1, retainer fee, that those boxes don't have to be checked.
No, if you're not using it or it doesn't apply, then don't check it and don't fill it in.
Do you want NA on line 25?
We no longer need to use any NA.
Okay.
It says right in the agreement, check all that apply, says that if it's left blank, it's considered 0.
Okay.
So no more NA, only check the boxes that apply and then fill in the necessary blank. Just like on compensation number 2, I have the number 2 box checked, and then I have line 38, 6%. And that would be a normal listing fee.
Okay.
Okay. Next page 40. Don't forget to check box 3, cooperation shared compensation. Again, it says what it's for. We're going to cooperate with other brokers. Line 51 is for a buyer's agent, and line 53 is a transaction broker. As always, line 49, we do not offer sub-agency at this point in time.
No reason to put NA on 50.
No NAs. None at all anymore. Okay? And then other compensation. Other compensation in our other contracts was what we liken to a marketing or admin fee. So if you'd like to charge one, you can, what that fee is. Oh, let's go back to that retainer fee. I'm sorry, I should address this. The retainer fee at line 27 will or will not be credited against any other compensation owed to realtor. Okay, so you can credit it or not credit it. An attorney, when you usually go in and pay $500 or $1,000 retainer fee, they usually give you X amount of hours that will eat up that fee, which people about to. But anyway, you can or cannot, doesn't matter. That if they don't buy anything, that's your fee. That's what you got paid.
Okay, so that gets paid to
Always tell them,
and then you hold a percentage from that.
yes, you will pay your.
So
And on your tax, you'll
if
pay
we
the
receive
receipts on that.
$600,
That'll get you to your tax faster too.
so we just want, if we want $600, I'm just making up a number, then we would actually get $400 for that.
Depends on where you are with
Okay.
Wouldn't it be wise to collect it when you're signing these documents?
Yes, absolutely.
Because
Because if the listing
you won't get it
expires,
later.
if the listing expires and you haven't already collected it, what's the likelihood of you getting it?
Right.
Right. Yeah. So if you're going to charge a retainer fee, get it today.
And then is that also kind of what we would use, say if we're doing a listing and we're putting all the photos and drones and all the stuff open out, that can
tell them
for
it's
that.
or whatever, but it's a retainer fee. It's a fee to hire me.
Yeah.
The compensation fee is also going to be a marketing or admin fee. So there's 3 different types of fees set out in an agreement anymore. Okay? Okay, back over to page 2, transaction broker, whatever you're split. You do not have to split your commission 50-50. But I do recommend that you stay make it attractive enough that other agents will want to work on and help you sell your property. Don't be greedy. It doesn't matter who sells that property. You are working for the seller and your job is to get the property sold. Okay? No matter who sells it. So make it attractive to other brokers to bring their buyers to your property. Protection period, I usually put in 90 days. That protects, go ahead.
We're still required to put NA on all those other lines.
No.
No, no NAs.
Okay, I'm sorry, I hadn't said about.
Yeah, that's okay. No NAs. We're not doing NA anymore at all.
Praise the Lord.
Unless it's said.
Thank you.
Unless it's said. Now you gotta read the documents, of course. Unless it says NA if not applicable. And there are a few lines that will set that out. So read the documents. You should have read all these already, know what they say, and know what questions you have about them. If you've read it through. Okay? The protection period, I liken that to the lock on the door. It keeps honest people honest. If someone's going to try to get around your agreement, they probably will. You may or may not find out. One thing about the protection period, it only kicks in if they do not list their property again, and you have provided them with a list of the buyers that looked at their property while you have it listed. Okay? Owner-seller concessions. This is a new one. They've added this to the contract. Owner authorized realtor to advertise seller concessions and check one. In the amount of, no they won't, or consider at a later date. I'm just going to normally put consider at a later date. It's a negotiating tool also. Just like the warranty program. I usually put consider at a later date unless they have one that they're going to transfer over already. Or unless they want to purchase one right away so that some of their systems are covered while the property is listed. Okay? Page 3. Motivating factors. As always, do they or do they not want you to disclose why they're selling the house? If they do, that reason should be put on line 89, and that's the only reason you should ever be telling anybody as to why they're selling the house. Offers. You should disclose the existence of offers. You should not disclose the terms of those offers. Love letters. That's a hard no. We do not accept love letters. And there's a love letters. This is going to be part of your listing packet. Also, you will provide them with the flyer concerning love letters and about how easy it is to make a decision unconsciously with implicit bias on accepting an offer on their property. We don't usually have that issue any longer now that we're not in so many multiple offer situations, but it's still on the contract, so we will still require the flyer to be initialed by your buyer and part of your packet. Current representation agreement, are they or are they not in a current agreement with anybody else? If so, you'll put in the correct date, and then your listing does not become effective until that agreement expires. Owner's disclosures, will they or will they not fill it out? You should always try to have the owner fill out a seller's disclosure. They're the ones that know the most about the property. Now, in the case of a bank-owned property, they obviously know nothing. In the case of an inherited property, they may not know anything about the property. They may have never even seen the property. So there are instances where it doesn't apply. But most of the time, if it's an investor or a seller that lives in that property, they know about that property. So we should encourage them to fill those out. Mr. Seller, if you were buying a property, what would you want to know about it? Okay? Missouri is not a mandatory disclosure state. But, that being said, our disclosure statement has a black box here, and it says statutory disclosures. Statutory means state mandated. The state wants these disclosures in this black box. So at the very least, they should be filling out page 1. They can go to page 2 and mark that they will not fill out the rest of it. And then they will go to page 6 and sign and date it. But again, try to get as much filled out as you possibly can. Okay? Land-based page disclosure. Yes, if it was built prior to 1978, you have to. This is a federal mandate. You have to have a lead-based paint disclosure filled out. It should be completed in its entirety, including, I will say that Keller Williams Tri-Lakes 2 years ago was #1 in the whole board of realtors for the most lead-based paint disclosures returned because they forgot to initial line 33. Please, I have been working diligently not to receive that honor again. So please, initial line 33 when your seller and yourself sign the agreement. Thank you. I appreciate it. You don't know how much ribbing I took over that one. Okay, then as always, read the documents. I'm just going over the highlights. Page 4, line 140, the owner is or is not a foreign person. If they are a foreign person, you will need to get in contact with the title company to see what may be required for them to sell the property. Usually there's a thing where they'll hold out taxes or whatever, but yeah, if they are a foreign person, you need to get a hold of the title company and see what they have to do. Again, reading the agreement, you will notice in line MLS cooperation and lock boxes that it does no longer put out that we will put in the MLS if there's a cooperation compensation, because that's now gone. Page 5, inspection access. The owner authorizes the realtor cooperating brokers and their representative licensees to show the property. They will also have the utilities turned on and let the buyer have access for any inspections he sees necessary. If they have any video or audio recordings, that's fine, but they need to understand that they may be in violation of state, local, or federal laws regarding privacy. Buyers can expect privacy when they view a home. If they do record, again, they can't use it for anything. Don't want to see Brad Pitt walking through their living room on Facebook and use it for their house. Also, don't want to hear from them when people have conversations in their house they don't want to hear. I've had several phone calls from not very happy sellers because agents seem to like to express their opinion, which their opinion doesn't matter. Should not be expressing how much you hate the floor or the color of the living room. Okay? Another one called one time. People looked at the house and then they went out on the front porch, stood around for a half an hour negotiating the contract that they were going to make an offer on a different house they looked at that day. They weren't very happy that they were tying up their property while they were discussing another house. So always remember, when you look at a property, just figure you're either being recorded audio or video or both. Okay? So conduct yourself accordingly. 231, fresh title disclosure, that should always be checked. 255, here's the designated agency part. We do practice designated agency. 255, your name goes on there if you're a single agent. If you are part of a team, all team member names go on there. Line 257, that is where I will sign. You do need to date it. I suggest you do not use a date stamp. That signature does not need to be dated in time to state it. My signature has to have a date on it that is at the same time or before the client's. So I suggest you type in a date and send it to me. Okay? After that, it is, the conversion to transaction, well, dual agency, and I do not participate in dual agency. You can do a yes or no. All of these are, that one is yes or no. The rest are all yes. They are yes because they have to do with the appointment of designated agency, and we do participate in designated agency. Next. Line 7, licensee's personal interest. This is if your mother, brother, uncle, cousin, whomever is buying the property, or maybe you are part of the LLC that's buying the property. You have to disclose that you are a real estate agent and you are a party to the contract or related to someone that is a party to the contract. Line 325, if you fill out an email address under the owner's names, then you should be checking this box. And this just says that text, email, verbal communications are okay. We can act upon those communications and then follow up with written documents after the fact. So let's say your client's laying on the beach in Maui and decides that they're never coming back to Branson, and they call you and say, hey, reduce the price of my property by $150,000. I'm never coming back. I just want it sold. You can immediately reduce that price. And then, of course, follow up with paperwork when it's convenient for all of you. 336 should always say Keller Williams Tri-Lakes, no other name. The rest of it's self-explanatory. Then the last 2 pages, again, go over the different types of agency available to a seller in the state of Missouri.
In line 336, should always say KW Tri-Lakes.
What do I have? Yeah.
Yes.
So that email address,
Say KW Tri-Lakes.
that email address line, then we do put in a.
Yes, yes. Yes, you do have, unless it says that you have to, so yes. Okay, and that measurement disclaimer, this is another document we require. The measurement disclaimer. This puts a buyer on notice, Mr. Buyer, if this is all important to you, then you or your agent need to do your own due diligence and ascertain what the square footage of that land is, what the square footage of the house is, or whatever question they need. I have used this document several times, about 5 of them, I think, where people have bought a house and the listing agreement or the listing in the MLS said it was 1,200 square feet. And after they bought the house, lo and behold, they found out that it was only 1,142. Yes, I have gotten that call. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I had gotten that call, and I said, well, were you provided with a measurement disclaimer? Well, yes, but we had to do that. Well, if it's important to yeah, and if that 59 or 58 square feet made a big difference, you got it done. Okay, seller's disclosure statement is done.
Question.
Yes.
I see a few agents marking other, and then they're putting the previous MLS in the.
Yes.
No.
I've seen a lot of those actually.
Oh, it's happening all the time.
Not here.
Not on our brokerage, but other
I was
agents
gonna
put it
say,
on the MLS. Oh my gosh, all the time.
This is my service. These are my monies. I don't have any other money, so I don't care what they do.
I just don't.
Yeah, no, don't ever, never ever.
What was the statement?
Pardon me?
What was the statement?
Put it in other and stating previous
Previous
MLS.
listing.
Use
Yeah.
previous MLS. Then you'll see another document is a seller's disclosure statement addendum. Let's say that something breaks down during the listing of the property and they fix it. Or they were under contract and they had an inspection and the notice pointed out some things that had to be fixed and they fixed those. Or they found out about something new, whatever it may be. Instead of doing a whole new seller's disclosure statement, you can do this again. They can fill out one of these amendments. Okay? Then the authorization to furnish TILA RESPA. Disclosure. This just gives a third party. Say it might be their bank, their attorney, their financial advisor, whomever. This gives a third party permission to talk to you about your seller's finances. Okay? That's it. That's all you need for a listing. Any question on a listing?
Maybe that one thing too, I know you're not talking about this. That form is required of your seller if it's your listing and they have found discrepancies, you are required to update that MLS.
What's that?
Updating the seller disclosure if damages were found on the previous.
Well, then you should upload the addendum.
That's
You
what I'm
should
saying.
always upload the seller's disclosure to the MLS as well as the measurement disclaimer, because if it's your listing, that measurement disclaimer is going to be required when you have a sale contract. Yes,
So if you have a property that's listed and it goes through inspection and the deal falls apart, you now have an inspection in your hand with a bunch of disclosures as to what's wrong. What are you legally required to update on the listing at that point?
on the listing or on the seller's disclosure.
On the seller's disclosure?
Let's say they fixed some stuff or they found some material facts that are wrong. If it's piddly little stuff, normal wear and tear, don't worry about it. But let's say they found the furnace went out while it was listed. Well, then you would want to do the addendum and update it to say that a new furnace was installed whenever, or a new water heater, or a new dishwasher.
But if it says that the roof is, how do you want it immediately,
Yes.
the subfloor is garbage or the foundation is.
Yes, that should also be disclosed. And let's talk about inspections. Those are not our property, nor are they the seller's property. Those are the buyer's property and the inspection company's property. We should never be sharing those inspection reports on our listings unless our seller went ahead and paid to have an inspection and wants to share it. I still would say and encourage any buyer to have their own inspection. We do not want people basing this decision of buying a piece of property, which is probably the biggest purchase they will make in their lives, most people's lives, on someone else's information. So, that's not to share those. Okay? Now we're going to move on to the sale contract. Again? No wonder I don't want to talk to my man.
But the buyer agrees to give the seller a copy of the inspection.
They have to if they're going to serve an inspection notice.
But let's say the buyer falls through and the next buyer, if we get permission from the first buyer
No.
to share that inspection, no.
No. Under no circumstances should we be sharing a buyer's inspection on our listing.
No, not on the listing, just with the next buyer.
Still our listing, isn't it?
Yeah, but you saw the buyer,
So
first
we're
buyer
sharing
says you
another
have
buyer's inspection notice about our listing to another buyer. No.
the inspection, not the report, the inspection itself. It's whoever.
It's an advertising report.
Yeah, it's the buyer owns.
I'm thinking of the notice. I'm sorry. I was thinking the note. We
No,
would show notice,
You
but
know, not the notice
Okay.
either. That is a confidential to that.
Yeah, that's a comment.
You just start all over.
Yeah.
Wipe the slate.
Yeah,
and-
there should be no inspection sharing. Okay?
So we all know that's happening. That's why I'm asking the question.
Do what?
We all know that's happening. People sharing it.
Inspections.
That you know,
If it's out of this office, I want to know.
sure. If you share it with me from there, you should not install it.
Well, yeah, other agents, they'll put in the MLS, inspection notice available, or inspection available. Well, heck, no, you would want to encourage your buyer to get their own. Yes,
If I represent the buyer, is there any reason why I can't ask for it and see if they're dumb enough to give it to me?
I wouldn't. Again, your buyers should be making decisions on their own information, not someone else's information.
Because it may not have been the greatest inspector to start with.
Right.
And we are
No, so
You know, you
Yeah.
don't know if one of those, if it was one of those inspectors that's a deal breaker rather than an actual inspector.
Well, that kind of takes the facts out of what she has.
So it's really irrelevant. When you just get a new one.
Yeah.
Yeah, if you're giving them somebody else's, you're kind of taking the credibility of that, you know.
Right, yeah, that's something that you're providing, yeah, don't do it.
And then, next fire, you they didn't go back out and use the old stuff.
What?
I don't think you heard what she said. That's a good point.
So if you have, you talked about inspectors and deal breaking, causing deal, the deal breaker inspector. Kind of brings back around to what she asked about how much do you have to disclose, because
If it's
he may have said, he may have brought out stuff that really isn't a problem.
if that receptacle plate is crooked, no, we don't have to disclose that. If there's no grounds in the receptacles, yes. If it's a material fact,
But if they suspect the foundation may have an issue and you should follow up with a specialist.
exactly. If it may be wrong, if it is wrong, then your seller should be addressing that.
Yeah.
If it's a major thing,
Absolutely.
but yeah.
So someone come look at it.
Right.
Someone asks you about the.
And you can always get a specialist or a tradesman to come and say, hey, is the roof really bad? Yes, absolutely. Okay. Okay. Moving on. Keller Williams Tri-Lake sale cover sheet, same thing as before. You will notice there's a new document listed on your sale cover sheet. Compensation agreement write-up. We'll be talking about that. Again, this form needs to be filled out. It needs to be the first form you put into your command file. And you do have to fill out your buyer information if it's your buyer. If another company brought you the buyer, don't worry about it. I don't have to get a hold of that. But you do have to fill this out. Should be the first sheet in there.
If it's in there, but we haven't submitted yet, are you able to view it?
Yep, I'm able to see everything.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure we don't have to submit it once we fill it all in. It just has to be there where you can access it. If we haven't got the rest of the stuff.
You submit the file. Yeah. And it should already have been there because it's the first document you load.
Okay.
Okay.
I just wanted to make sure.
Oh,
So it should already be there.
No, it's the last one.
It's always the last one I look, because I don't know if I'm gonna have everything, because there's some things that doesn't qualify, so I don't go and pre-check my list. I do too sometimes.
First thing I do when I open up
So
a
you
file.
already know that you may or may not have a MLS sheet.
Well, obviously, yeah.
You can update it though.
Oh, you can update.
Yeah,
it.
no,
It's
I
just
do. I
that
update it
yeah.
sometimes, yeah.
Yeah.
If I get something wrong.
Yeah. Again, MREC disclosure. We all know what that is. That should be given to the buyer. This is obviously a sale file, so you're going to be, first of all, we're going to go through the buyer documents. The buyer exclusive agency, that's the agreement I've attached here. There are two other ones, non-exclusive, and transaction brokerage. You do have to have one of these signed before you show a buyer any property.
Hey, Deb.
Whether you walk through the door or you do it by video, you have to have one signed. Yes.
Question on the consent. Well, I guess this would have been more on the listing side. If you're filling this out, if you're designated agent
And what?
on your team, the brokerage relationship, will all our team members have to sign
Designated
that?
agency, yes.
If we put multiple names on there, do they need to be co-listed whenever we're listing
No.
on the MLS?
No. No. Those are just a list of the names that
For
the
you.
broker has designated to work on behalf of that client.
Okay.
But if you're on a team, your team is designated because the team is treated as an individual at this point in time in the state of Missouri.
Okay.
Right?
Thank you.
Right.
My listing, buyer wants to see it. I'm gonna represent the seller. Do I need
Do a
to have any
transaction
document,
broker agreement with buyer.
transaction?
Transaction broker. Yep. And you will switch to transaction brokerage.
So I can't represent the seller on both sides.
You could, in the non-exclusive, I think you have that choice.
But if you have a listing agreement and
You still have to have a buyer agreement signed. A buyer's agreement doesn't necessarily make agency. It does not constitute an agency. It's just a buyer agreement. They're stating that they understand that if they buy that property, they're gonna owe you a commission. Just because you work for the seller on both sides doesn't mean you're not getting both sides of that commission, correct?
Correct.
Right. So you have to have some sort of a buyer agreement, whether it be an exclusive, a transaction broker, non-exclusive, or stating that I represent the seller, and I think that's in the non-exclusive agreement. I think that's something about a part of it. But yes, you still have to have it signed. Look at it like.
So that's probably the one I would want to use.
If you're going to represent only the seller, yes. But you're still gonna charge that. You're still gonna fill out this buyer agreement, and you're gonna say it's gonna cost you X percent. Because otherwise you can't get paid both sides of that commission.
I can't get both sides in.
No, not unless you have this filled out, and you can only take. There's two sides to every commission, right?
Yep.
The listing, the buyer broker, the co-broker compensation, whatever you want to call it. So as the listing agent representing the seller without a buyer agreement with commission in it, you can only take the listing side.
Wow, that's a big change.
It is.
Yeah.
It is. You cannot take any more on the co-broke side than what is listed in your buyer agreement.
So you have,
Notice I don't call it a buyer's agency because it's not always going to be agency. But consider it like an authorization to show. Mr. Buyer, this is an authorization to show you this property. If you buy this property, I'm going to get paid.
okay, so if the buyer doesn't have any money to do that, in that case, it would be.
You're going to co-broke. You're going to take your co-broke, right? You have a list side and a co-broke side.
Your sellers have already.
Your sellers have already agreed to pay both sides.
Yes. Okay.
So that you take your total commission and split it.
Yeah.
Or offer a co-broke. So you'll be able to take the co-broke, the buyer portion commission.
So
So I have a
this buyer agreement is converting me from a seller's agent.
No, you can
So-
be a seller's agent and still have a buyer agreement. You've not created an agency.
Okay, you talked about a transaction.
Transaction broker, yes, you can also, rather than,
So those are different documents.
yes,
Okay.
yes.
So I have a listing and I brought a buyer to that listing. So in the listing, it says in that contract that at any time I can bring a buyer, I turn into a transaction broker. No other paperwork's needed. Well, when I brought my buyer, I did the buyer's exclusive agency contract and I told them, you know, if you don't like this house, it's a buyer's exclusive agency. In this case, I will be transitioning in transaction broker. However, if you don't like the house that I'm listing, then we can go look at another one and then I'm still your buyer's agent.
Right.
So that's why I do the buyer's exclusive agency contract because it can change without having to do more paperwork.
Unless they don't want representation. If they don't want representation, representation doesn't have anything to do with commission or compensation. You do not have to create an agency with the agreement. It's just an agreement to allow you to show them, walk them through the doors. Right.
but I still used it to walk them through my
You
list.
still have to have some
Yeah.
sort of agreement.
And they understood that they had to pay me my commission on that side
Right,
if we couldn't procure it from my sellers.
Right.
But obviously I already knew that answer,
Right.
so.
because you have it listed, right,
What
yeah.
was the difference between that and dual agency?
Dual agency, I don't believe that an agent can do dual agency properly. I've already told Mr. Seller, I'm your listing agent, I'm going to get you the most money I can for that house. Now over here, I have Mr. Buyer, who I also have, Mr. Buyer, I'm gonna give you the best price on a house I can possibly get you. Where do those two meet? They don't. So I will be a transaction broker. The difference between dual agency and transaction broker, let me tell you. There's only a couple differences. When you're a dual agent, you owe care, obedience, and loyalty, confidentiality, full disclosure, accounting for all funds, presenting offers timely, and disclosing all known facts. Okay? Dealing honestly and fairly, and loyalty. When you're a transaction broker, you have all the same duties except for loyalty and obedience. Otherwise, you have all the same responsibilities towards that buyer. Okay? And you're actually facilitating the transaction. Okay.
So it's just to repeat, so in her case, she had a listing and a buyer, and so when she brought the buyer, she became a transaction broker for the buyer.
Both.
Or both.
And you can only wear one hat.
She's still got a commission from both.
Yeah.
Okay, got it.
Yes.
And at this point, I'm just basically taking care of the timelines on the contract. I'm taking care of,
You still owe them disclosure.
I
You
owe
have to tell them
facts.
the
Yeah.
material facts. You just don't recommend, you don't make recommendations. If they say, I just don't know what to offer, you can do a CMA on that property and hand them the paperwork. There's their black and white, make your decision. Okay? Okay, buyer's exclusive agency, or whichever buyer agreement you use. Line 1, their legal names. How are they going to be taking title to the property? Line 2, always Keller Williams Trilics. Line 5, what kind of property are they looking at? Then the agency period. It does have to have an expiration. This document can be for 1 hour, 1 day, 1 property, 1 year, 10 years, whatever. Whatever you and that buyer agree to. Normally, if it's just a property that they just want to see one, you just put in that address and that goes under the other. Okay? Disclosure authorizations, do they want you to tell anybody why they're buying the property? Current exclusive representation, they're always going to tell you no. Sometimes they don't even know they have one. But you have to ask, always ask. Broker compensation and cooperation. Again, they have the retainer fee. I can see a retainer fee being charged to the buyer becoming very common. How often is it that you get a buyer, and even if they sign an exclusive right to sell or exclusive agency agreement, and you show them property for 3 or 6 months, and then they decide, oh, we're going to just stay in Illinois, or we're going to move to Florida, or whatever. So you get nothing. Oh, yeah. Maybe they're going to go to Alabama. Florida. There you go. Anyway, how often does that happen? And when that happens, you're done. You're out. You've got no money. So I can see starting to charge a retainer fee becoming very commonplace with buyers.
Would they pay that,
Up front, if I was to charge a retainer fee, the day you come in and we sign this agreement and we're gonna go look at property, you bring in the check. Okay.
I was gonna say, otherwise, it would be legal action to follow up on it, otherwise it would be worth whatever your retainer fee.
Right.
What's a reasonable amount?
I was gonna ask, but
What is a reasonable amount? I don't know.
$10,000.
You're right.
$10,000. Yes. That's reasonable.
It's what you buy. You know, what are you willing to work for? How often do you work for free for buyers? And
All
you
the
don't buy
time.
anything. All the time. This may help your bottom line greatly. Even if you charge $500 or $250. It's more than what you got before, right? Yeah. Then you can also say it will or will not go towards the compensation if they buy the property. And then, of course, when that fee is due, and again, if I were going to charge a retainer fee, it's due right away. Or you walk through the door.
Does the retainer fee go directly to the agent or the office?
Office always. You
Always
can never
goes to
be
Keller.
paid by anybody but the brokerage. So it always goes to Keller.
So then the portions of that would still come out as,
If you have not capped, yes, your fees would still come out. And just think about it. That's going to get you to your cap sooner.
yeah, no, it makes a
Yeah.
difference on what you may charge.
But always, everything goes to the brokerage.
You
You're
brought
just
us up
full of questions today.
with, well, I haven't been here in 5 years. The retainer fee,
Yes,
which I think is wise. I've worked a lot of years for it.
absolutely.
How do you see, it makes sense to me, let's say you got $1,000. It makes sense to me to offer that to be credited towards the compensation. How would we do that? I mean, we've received a check. They
If they buy,
put out how much contract, then how do we do that?
Well, they're writing the check to Keller Williams,
Okay.
first of all, right?
and first of all, it says the retainer fee will or will not be credited against any other compensation owed to the realtor for services rendered hereunder in the event a property is acquired by a buyer under this agreement. So if they don't buy anything, you just keep the 1,000.
Right.
If they do buy something and you want to credit it, it's going to go, you're always going to fill out number 2 also.
Right.
So it'll go towards that fee on number 2. To where, okay, let's say, and I'm still waiting on an answer from Legal Line, but I think I have it figured out. So let's say you have a buyer's agreement here and we filled out line 39, number 2, and it's for 3%. Line 44 and 3%. And then we also do line 28 and we're going to charge $1,000. So let's say they buy $100,000 property. Your portion of that is $3,000. Well, now you only need $2,000 because they paid the $1,000.
Right.
Okay, so when we take the offer to the seller and the agent says, "Yep, we're co-broking 3%," but wherever you're showing the property, that agent says, "Yes, we are offering a buyer broker compensation of 3%." Okay, now you can credit back that $1,000 to the buyer.
If you want. Okay. When?
At closing.
At closing, it would be as a credit.
And credit the $1,000 back to them. Yes, that's how they get it back.
Would there be any issue with finance companies?
I don't think so, no, because most lenders have said the buyer broker compensation is an allowable expense. So then we'll go over that in the sale contract, how we would state that. But that's how I think it needs to go.
So are you getting that retainer fee up front,
Yep.
written to Keller Williams? Are we holding that check
No,
until closing?
Why?
Or we go ahead and give it to you straight away? You are cashing it.
Yes. You're gonna get that retainer fee no matter if they buy anything or not.
Okay, gotcha.
The credit part comes in if they do buy. So
So we just tell the title company,
we would be giving them some sort of a statement or a copy of this agreement that, hey, the seller compensation is 3% to Keller Williams Trilace, but 1% of that is $1,000 of that is going back to the buyer as a credit.
It's in the contract.
So the commission check would still be 3,000.
No, the commission check would be 2,000. The
It
buyer would check
adjusts.
back.
But the seller's paying for the 3%, but we're crediting them back $1,000.
Right.
Okay.
Until I'm told differently.
Okay.
And I have a call in the legal line. How does that look? But that's the best way I can figure it out.
So that's the timeline. Okay.
It's like they put an earnest down, but under us instead of under just them, their own name.
Well, no, it's a retainer fee. I'm hired.
Earnest is different than.
If I don't buy anything,
I think she was talking about the concept. It's the
Yeah.
concept.
Yeah.
Yeah. She's not on the,
so
she was thinking.
and then of course on page 2 we have other compensation. Again, a lot of people charge 179, 200, 199, whatever, as a marketing admin fee. And let's say you do have an admin, you pay that admin X amount of dollars on every transaction that they help you with. So that may be what it is. Protection period, again, the same as a listing agreement, only good, if they buy something you showed them, and I think you have to provide them with a list of properties. Which names of prospective, a list of prospective sellers for the properties. 91, designated agency, same thing, your name or all team member names, I sign on my 96, type in the date. Page 3, these are all the types of agency. Again, I don't participate in dual agency, the rest will all be yes. Page 4, if you're going to use an email address, then you should check box 198, always check box 218. Again, everything's already like it should be. The last 2 pages are about agency. Also, when you're working with a buyer, you should always get the authorization, the ILA rest file. You are going to need to talk to their lender. Most buyers don't understand what type of loan they're getting, if they need concessions, or anything about it. You will need to call that lender. And you should also be getting a pre-qualification letter, or a pre-approval letter up front. A pre-approval letter is better than a pre-qual. Pre-qual is this, that they've taken their information. Based on the information they've provided, they think they can get a loan. A pre-approval says that they've checked their credit and they have a score big enough to get a loan. So you should always be asking for a pre-approval letter. You need to send this document to the lender, or their financial advisor, or their bank, or their attorney, any third party. Now let's get into the contract. Our contract went from 8 pages to 11. And again, that's because fingerprint more spaces. Yay! I like it. Okay. Line 2, buyer legal names, how they're going to take title to the property. Line 6, property address. Section 2 now covers the purchase price, seller concessions, and earnest money. Always, if you're getting earnest money, fill in line 17 where it goes, where it's going to be deposited to. Usually that's the closing company that you're using. Always remember the default number of days is 5, and it's calendar days. All of our contracts are only calendar days. They do not do business days. So if you get that contract on Monday,
It's due Friday.
Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. It's due Saturday, should be there on Friday because Monday is late. Okay? And according to the contract, if the earnest money is not timely delivered to the escrow agent, the seller may terminate the contract, provided notice thereof to the buyer at any time prior to that deposit. Okay? Closing, where are you going to close at? And on what date? Do not use on or before. Only use the date. If that date is approaching and you're not going to make it, get an amendment done. Amendment to the contract done to extend that date. If you get ready early and you're going to close early, great. Get an amendment done to closure by all parties. Okay? Again, read the contract. Know what it says. Section 4 is now what used to be section 2, and they've added some things to this list of inclusions and exclusions. Make sure you go over in detail with your buyer and your seller. Sometimes your seller beforehand. When you list a property, you should probably be taking a copy of a sale contract and going over that with the seller so they know what to expect when they get an offer. And especially section 4. This states what has to stay with the property and what the buyer will expect to stay with the property. What they?
Oh, I see they added mirrors finally to the contract.
Yeah. They've added some other things.
Oh,
Oh gosh, I don't know. Some pumps.
Yeah.
Back up.
saw that.
They electronic vehicle charging stations.
Blind shades and shutters.
Yeah, they added some stuff. So your seller needs to be aware of what their expectation is. And your buyer needs to be aware of what they can expect to have there when they take over the property. Now, to avoid misunderstanding, list below as included or excluded any items which you say may be subject to question. If you're going to list personal property on here, always follow up with at no additional value. That'll usually get you through the lending. Because lenders do not want to loan money on personal property, they only loan money on real estate. So if you add that little verbiage at the end of it, that'll usually get you by the lender.
Hey, Deb, I got a question on that I ran into an instance with this past year. And this was actually from an appraisal standpoint. We had an appraiser that appraised a condo of ours, brand new remodeled, but it was being sold, not furnished. He appraised our unit because it was not being sold furnished lower than the building over, which he did a month before, because it was being sold fully furnished. How does that work
If there's no
versus on
additional
this?
value-
No additional value.
If there's no additional value assigned to the personal property, they should not be considering it.
Oh, we contested it. And he goes, no changes to me.
So it depends. Was that contract, did it say, that it was that price with all that stuff? Or did it say no additional value? And there's your difference right there. But again, lenders usually won't let that fly without that verbiage. Again, on line 46, this contract and not a seller's disclosure statement, MLS, or other promotional material provides for what is included with the sale. So even if it says in the MLS the refrigerator is staying, and you haven't listed the refrigerator on line 51, it may not be staying. Okay? Excluded. Say they have something they wanted to exclude and it was in the MLS and we all understand. Put it in black and white. That way we all know we're on the same page. Sale and financing contingencies. The sale is not contingent upon the sale or closing of another property, or it is contingent upon the sale and closing of another property. I have just spent 4 days with an agent from our office regarding contingency sales. He was working with another agent in another area that insisted a contingency for sale of a buyer's property. That means it's contingent upon the sale of the property. Meaning they may not have or just have put their property on the market and they do not have an offer on it. Okay, so it has to sell and close. There's normally a kickout involved with a sale contingency. If there is a kickout involved, it shows up as active with contingency in the MLS. Let's say that property, that buyer receives an offer on their property, but it is also contingent upon the sale of that buyer's property. So now we have a domino effect. The other agent insisted that we send them an existing property sale kickout notice. No, we do not send them an existing sale property kickout notice because we don't have a contract. We have a contingency on it. Right on line number 8, it says, okay, 7 and 8. When the existing property goes under contract to sell with a closing scheduled on or before the scheduled closing date of this contract and which does not contain a contingency for the sale of another property.
What are you on?
Yeah.
What line was that?
Contingency for sale of buyer's existing property.
Okay.
So, if the offer that they get contains the contingency sale of another property, we do not kick out of a sale contingency. We are not pending. Make sense?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
No, when it switches to.
Well, obviously to that broker, that agent, it did not make sense. So, I highlighted and sent our agent a nice little email and asked them to please share with the other agent and broker. Haven't heard anything since I sent it back to them. So that's why it's so important to read these forms. How many of you knew that sentence was in the sale contingency?
I do those all the time, so.
Hmm?
I do it all the time, so it's not a big deal. I already understand it, so.
Yeah. It does not contain a contingency. Then you would, if it did, if it's just a sale, then you would serve them the property kickout notice and all your timelines begin. So then you would probably follow up with a contingency that's closing of the property. Okay?
Now, on the contingency for closing, when it switches to closing, that allows it to be pending, correct?
Right. That then
But
changes
it
it to
has to be
pending
for closing.
and all your timelines
Switches.
start. For your inspections, for your appraisal, for every timeline that you have in the contract, it starts. Okay? As long as we all understand that. I was so sick of going over that with them. Anyways. Okay, line 63, appraisal contingency, I always check this box. Whether they're gonna have an appraisal or not, I always check this box. Every buyer will feel a little bit of remorse. Maybe they'll say, oh, yeah, I know we're getting a great deal on that property. We don't need to have an appraisal. We don't care about that. We know it's a good deal. So that buyer goes home and he sleeps a couple of nights. They get up on a Wednesday morning and go, yeah, you know what? We maybe should have an appraisal just to make sure. So they call and say, hey, Dad, we decided we want an appraisal. Well, I haven't checked that box because they told me they didn't need one. So we have an appraisal. Oh, lo and behold. Appraisal's low. It's not purchase price. Too bad, so sad. They're paying purchase price if they're buying that property. Because I didn't check that box. So, I always check that box. I don't want them mad at me if they change their mind. Okay? Always, there are 11 dates that are very important in a sale contract. Those dates, the number of days that you made your contingencies or your inspections or whatever due, you should be counting those out according to your closing date. Okay? Don't just use and automatically think that the default number in the contract will work with what you have to do. If you have a closing that's 45 days out, the likelihood of you getting an appraisal written or an appraisal delivered to you within that 25-day period is slim. Okay, so make sure you're paying attention to the date you close and the days you need to count out for the contingencies, inspections, etc. that are part of the contract. Those are all dates that you need to be aware of. However, you keep track of those. It's up to you. Put them on your calendar. However, but make sure because there's 11 throughout the contract that you have to pay attention to. If any of those dates are missed, you may be putting your buyer's property at risk, or your seller's property for that matter. Okay, page 3, Financing contingency, it's not contingent about financing. Yeah, we like those. Those are the cash deals. Non-conventional financing, if it's non-conventional financing, you will be attaching a rider, most normally a government loan rider, and you will fill that out.
The
Uh-huh.
non-continuing financing option. I have seen a lot of people, if they have just a pre-approval letter, they are checking that box.
Fine.
Now, it's not cash, it's just a pre-approval letter.
Doesn't mean it's still not contingent upon financing. Even though they have a pre-approval letter, they're stating, even if our loan doesn't go through, we're obligated to buy.
Now, I see, has that been changed recently? Because
Nope, that's been there for a couple of years.
I remember back in COVID, I could have sworn those forms said that they were able to change financing if needed, or finance a
says
portion
that.
of it. They were able to finance a portion of it,
But it's not contingent on it.
but it's not.
They can do it if they want. They can be going to get 100% loan, but they're not making their offer contingent on it.
Okay.
Means they're obligated to buy it.
Yep.
Yeah. But they can be getting financing even though they say they're not.
Yep.
Most normally those are the cash buyers. But yes, some people get an advantage over another
They
offer
are using.
will say we're not making this contingent on the financing, but we do have a pre-approval button. Okay? And then conventional financing, that's your bank conventional financing. They have 5% down, they have 10% down, they have 20% down. That's why you need to talk to lenders. There's so many different types of financing. If you use option 3, then you will complete 99 and 100 and 101, those lines. If you're not using option 3, you do not need to complete those lines, as the government loan writer has all of that information on the line. Okay? Title and survey. There's 4 choices. Pick one. Each one of their choices will make a difference to the bottom line of either the buyer or the seller. Okay? Title commitment on line 120. A lot of people are missing this little line where you put in when the title commitment is going to be issued by. Usually it's the title company you're closing at. And then you have days to count out. That's due by, and we have this long to address it. Objections and delays that you have to count out. Inspections. The buyer has the right to do inspections, whether they hire somebody to do them, whether they think they're qualified to do them, however that works out, they have the right to do inspections. I always put in the fact that we have 15 days on line 182 to serve them and request a notice. By the time you get an inspection scheduled, get the report back, have time to go over the report with your buyer, and then do up an inspection notice. Usually 10 days is not enough. Again, remember, it's calendar days. Yeah.
You're 182, you actually have 7
days on it.
Yeah, you
Which I don't think that was intended. I think
That should be 15.
I was gonna say, I was.
It's like,
Yeah, 15, I think it's swap.
Yeah, I did. Yeah, and then line 184 should be 7.
Yeah.
And that's if I need a special. Right?
I just wanted to point that out.
She did that just to see if we were paying attention.
I made plenty of mistakes.
we're all human, that's the attention.
I'll own up to it. Okay, so I usually put 15 days to get that inspection notice submitted, and then 7 days if I need a specialist report. Okay? Resolution period is different than the inspection notice period. The resolution period is usually 10 days. That's the default. That's usually long enough. When I send an inspection notice to a seller or to a listing agent, you will see on the first line of my inspection notice, I always put in seller response requested by, and I'll put a date. maybe like 6 days down the line. Do they have to abide by that? No, it's not a law, a rule, a law. But it normally puts in their head, hey, we need to respond by that time. Because the resolution period is 10 days. That means the whole ball of wax is resolved. The seller has come back with their response to what we're asking for, and the buyer has had time to weigh that response and send back a response to them. So sometimes you'll get a seller that, or an agent even, that thinks 10 days means, oh, as long as it's back in their hand by 10 days. No, that's not the case. Okay? Now, if a seller comes back with, no, I'm not doing anything, it's as is, where is, take it or leave it. We then automatically go into a capitulation time period. Say that, Rob. We then go automatically to a capitulation time period, meaning that if they answered us within 2 days of that 10-day time frame, we have 8 days left, right? No. If they send back a no, we're not doing anything in response, we now have 2. Within 2 days, one of the parties has to capitulate, which means one of the parties needs to surrender. So either the buyer's going to say, hey, okay, we'll settle for blah, 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 or okay, we'll take it like it is. Or the seller will come back and say, well, we thought about it and we'll do this, this, and this, or we'll do everything on your list. That time period is 2 days.
The seller or the buyer has the right to get out of the contract at that time too. If they refuse to repair.
Right. Right.
So unless the buyer is signed an as-is inspection waiver, that kind of just negates everything.
If they say we'll take it. Yeah.
If they agree,
okay. Even if they say it's as is, and even if the buyer agrees that it's as is, they can still get out. They have the right to do the inspection.
right, if the number one.
And they can still get out of the contract if they feel like everything that they're taking on is too much.
Mhm.
If the inspection shows too many things that they don't want to address.
Unless they sign the as-is inspection waiver and number
And
2 or 3 is marked, then that's totally different.
Right. But we're ahead now. Okay.
And then if you're selling a piece of land, the buyer's buying.
Yep.
They waive whether they waive the inspections or not, or the appraisal or whatever, and it's just a piece of land. Do we still need to do the inspection notice?
If they waived it, no, but they should probably, on land, there are inspections to be done. There can be a perk test. If it doesn't come with a sewer system or water system, you might have to have a perk test to find out how the land, if the land's big enough or can hold the type of system that it needs. So there's still inspections to be
But
done.
even if they didn't pass up on an appraisal or inspection, and I put that in there to protect them, right? But they don't want to do it anyways. They weren't going to do it anyways.
So if they don't have it done within the time period set out in the contract, it's deemed waived.
It's deemed waived.
Yep.
So they don't have to sign this.
Oh. Okay, and then municipal inspections. And this is like over in Stone County, where they mandate that a septic system that is 10 years or older has to have an inspection and then be issued a septic transfer certificate. So always keep that in mind, if there's any municipal or government inspections that need to be done. Home warranty, they acknowledge there's multiple choice, 3. Pick one. Disposition of earnest money, always remember the title company cannot do anything with that earnest money without written consent. Page 6, this sets out adjustments and closing costs. The buyer shall pay for, and if you read through these, you will notice commission and other compensation for the buyer have been added to the buyer shall pay for, seller shall pay for, and seller's is done. Page 8, seller's disclosure statement. Did they get one? Did they not get one? Do they want to ask for one? Always remember, if they didn't get one and they want to ask for one, that gives them 3 additional days to back out of this contract. So if you have a seller's disclosure, upload. There's no reason not to have it uploaded into the MLS. That MLS should be full of information that any buyer would want to know about that property, so that you don't have to be playing back up and give a buyer 3 more days for remorse to set in and back out. Alright, page 9, riders. Compensation agreement rider, like 420, will always be checked on a sale contract and will always be part of the sale contracts. The compensation agreement rider. Let's look at that, shall we? It's the next one. This is the one you're waiting for, I just know it.
Let me find it.
Okay, this compensation agreement rider, of course, you're gonna have the property address and the compensation payment. Now, when you go to show a property, you're gonna text, email, or call the listing agent. Hey, I would like to show 123 Main Street. Are you offering a buyer broker compensation? They will respond with yes, we are, and it is, or no, we're not. Okay? Your buyer needs to know if they are not, because they have signed an agreement with you stating that they will pay you X amount. So if this property is not going to cover their agreement, they may choose not to look at it, but it's their choice if they want to be responsible or not. Or they may decide they want to take their chances and go ahead and look at it. So in the case of the listing broker says, yes, we are doing a co-op in the amount of, and it covers what your buyer agreement is for, you will check box line 6, box number 1, listing broker compensation to cooperating broker, and however much that was. Done. Then everybody signs. This document can be signed by you. You do not have to send it to me for signature. Okay? I have made it a part of our policies and guidelines manual that the managing broker is authorizing all agents to sign this document upon the broker's behalf. Okay? Let's say you call the listing agent and they say, yes, we're paying 1%, and your agreement's for 3% with your broker or with your buyer. And so the buyer says, well, we want to take a chance. We want to go ahead and look at it. So they go look at it and you're making an offer on it. So in that case, you would put the listing broker compensation as 1%. And then you would go ahead and check box number 2. Let's say the seller compensation to cooperating broker is going to be 2%. So that makes up your 3%. Now this doesn't automatically make it so. It has to be agreed to by all parties. So the seller says, okay, yeah, we'll pay the additional 2%. Or, let's say in the case of the listing broker says, no, we're paying 0. The seller has not authorized us to offer a cooperation compensation. So the buyer says, hey, I want to take my chances anyway. I want to look at their property. Well, lo and behold, they want to buy it. So in this case, you would just check line 10, box number 2, and put the seller compensation to the cooperating broker will be all of whatever is on your buyer agreement, 3%. Right?
I'm kind of confused. I mean, I'm not sure if I'm getting something here, but why does it say on line 11, the seller agrees? I thought this is the buyer.
This is a buyer, it goes with a sale contract.
Right.
Who's going to pay that listing commission?
Well, the buyer is either going to pay me or if they can procure it from the seller.
Okay, what the buyer can't afford to pay you. The buyer's not going to pay you.
Well, then they wouldn't be
Most
signing the
likely
buyer's
buyer's
agreement.
never gonna pay you. Very seldom will a buyer pay you.
But they know that they do have to owe me that when they sign a buyer's agreement. It's already done.
But it's up to them.
Yeah.
It also says in that agreement that you'll endeavor to collect it from the listing broker or seller.
Right.
So this is per
So
property.
this is where you're going to endeavor to collect it.
This is per property that you're
Each
selling.
property, yes.
In each individual property. So you gotta get that, talk to that
This
agent
goes with
ahead of time.
every sale contract you do.
Right.
Every sale contract you write up.
Yeah, I understand that part. I'm kind of confused.
So she's confused on the leasing and the seller deal.
Well, okay.
Yeah, there's a lease
So
and
you
a seller.
have a buyer agreement.
Yeah.
And with that buyer, you've set out that you're giving a 3% on whatever they buy. Okay. So you want to show 123 Main Street.
Yeah.
And 123 Main Street, the listing agent says, yes, we're offering a 3% buyer co-op.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, done. Then we mark but line 6, number 1, they told us they're paying 3%. Done. Finish. You may use both lines or maybe just line 2 also, depending on what the listing broker is telling you the co-op is.
Mm-hmm.
You want to collect your 3%
Right.
that you have with the agreement you have with your buyer. So this way, the listing broker can pay it, the seller can pay it, or it can be a combination of both. Just because you have a buyer agreement,
I guess on line 11, it seems like there's a definition of a word that's being used.
that's because you're asking the seller to kick in more. The
Okay.
listing broker is only cooperating, let's say 0 or 1%, or a portion thereof of your, whatever your buyer is.
So then line 10, number 2 is if you have convinced the seller, the
You
seller.
don't have to convince the seller,
Yeah, that's me.
unless it's your seller.
This is the buyer
This
requesting.
is the buyer requesting it.
I
It goes with
understand.
a sale contract.
I understand. I'm asking as a perspective of a buyer's agent. I'm not asking as a perspective of a listing agent. I'm asking as a perspective of a buyer's agent. So if I go and call a listing agent and say, okay, what is your compensation? They say,
Are you offering it?
they'll say 1%. Okay.
Okay.
So then I say, well, will your sellers,
Not up to that listing anymore. Not up to that listing broker.
so then what's the
Yeah, it's
purpose
just
of number 10?
Because you're gonna ask for it as part of the contract.
Okay, so this goes in with the offer.
Always,
Okay.
with every offer you write, every sale contract will contain a compensation agreement rider. Every sale contract you write.
Okay.
Without
I understand now. So this is, okay, so I know where I got, went wrong. Yeah.
Okay, so
But that seller can reject this, right?
Yes.
The seller can
Or they
reject.
or they can counter it.
So do they do the counter on a counter offer form?
I would say yes, because
Okay.
we
Do
have,
they need to designate?
well,
its
then they just
compensation
accept the
agreement?
contract and not accept this also.
Right.
So what I was
Go back
getting,
to negotiation with the buyer.
Yeah.
And the seller maybe,
Okay, gotcha.
right?
Got it.
So Dad, in the future, are they gonna be changing our counter offer forms to allow for a counter offer with a compensation agreement?
I think once we have a contract, if they've accepted the contract, but not this form, it would take an amendment.
You take an amendment, because that's my thing, because it would be nice in the future if on the counter, this would be able to be.
It might not-
counted.
Like, well, yeah, you know, if they're counter offering the other terms of the contract.
Okay,
But if they accept the contract,
yeah,
but just don't accept the rider, then that would have to be addressed with an addendum or an amendment.
okay.
and this is not allowed on the MLS pre-signed by the seller if they are
Absolutely
offering.
not. No, nothing to do with commission is allowed in MLS. Nothing. You can't offer 3 chickens. You can't say it'll last 30 days.
I love.
You can't say I have 5 apple trees. No. I love that.
That's a good idea.
Change all the blocks to 3 on all their photos.
So down.
Whoa. Well, let's talk about how everybody can get cute. We had the cooperation agreement between brokers. Remember that agreement? And that ahead of time sent out our agreement with the other company as to what the compensation would be paid. Well, we had some agencies that got real cute and said, okay, in any city in the state of Missouri, in this county, all addresses, Remax or whatever the company was, will provide a 3% co-vote to all agencies and send that document to every single brokerage in the MLS. In essence, creating a paper MLS. So now they took that part out of the cooperation agreement between brokers, and now we're left with just a cooperation agreement saying that if you're not a part of our MLS, yes, we will work with you if you want to do one of our properties. There is no longer any offer of compensation with. I do.
Oh, so
That's how all those cute ideas end up, making it tough on everybody else.
I will say a question. So you said that if they return the contract signed but not the rider, that we'd have to change that to an amendment or addendum. However, on line 420, if it's checked that there's a compensation agreement rider and they sign that contract, are they not just automatically liable?
Right.
Right, have to agree to it though. It's a part of the negotiation. It says, but all the defined terms of the contract carry over to this compensation agreement rider to the extent not specifically amended hereby. The terms of the contract remain in full force and effect. In the event of any inconsistency between the terms hereof and terms set forth in the contract, the terms hereof control. So it says to not specifically amend it. It would have to be amended. Okay.
Well, that just seems like that. For me as a buyer, that seems like a very.
You're always taking your chances.
Yeah,
when
that's
you're
not
asking
very.
the seller to do something additional.
But what's the difference? Okay, so that's like telling people that they can accept my offer, but I have a government loan rider attached, but they're not going to accept my government loan rider. So what's the difference between this and a government loan rider?
No.
That, I mean, but how can they
Nobody
accept
ever
a
said
contract?
they had
They
to
can
accept
accept
the
a government loan rider.
They would have to reject the offer or counter offer.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's
No, that a rider is a separate part of the
so
contract.
rider's a rider. That still creates that issue that I'm.
It doesn't make it, it doesn't mean that it has to be agreed to.
So they, how can they accept that offer then if they're not accepting a government loan rider that they have to have?
That's check mark.
In the case of the government
Yes.
loan rider, that is also addressing the financing paragraph, not just the riders.
But I thought there's somewhere in that contract that says that all riders or other contracts are part of this
Where
contract.
does it say that? Find that in. Find
No,
that-
I actually read that
Find that
somewhere.
So if, let me ask a question to make this clear, because I'm now on. So the seller accepts all the terms of the contract. And he signs that agreement, but he does not accept the compensation agreement, right? Then what's the next step as
Because now my
As
buyer
the-
wants it.
who has to initiate
Well,
this
you're gonna
amendment?
get back. You're gonna get it back from whomever, the listing agent or
Right.
your seller or whatever. It's gonna come back to you. They're gonna say, we are accepting the contract, but we are not accepting that the seller will pay any additional funds.
Should that be on the counter?
Okay,
No, it
Okay,
should not be on the account. They've accepted the contract.
okay, so then
Find that part.
I'm not buying.
So then,
And the buyer has the right to do that because the writer. But it's not.
What we're talking about is the thing. Yeah, so you go, I don't.
That's because like people like they don't important because the county would have divided this.
so in other words, I'm finished.
Yeah.
We finished this. So in other words, I get this back, the seller's not gonna pay anything for the compensation, so I'm gonna say, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, the seller will not pay, so you're gonna be responsible for paying this. I endeavored to collect it from the listing
Right.
agent and the seller. The seller says no, so now what do you want to do? End of discussion.
Right.
But they're already in.
And then
But they accepted the contract.
okay, say what that,
Yeah. Okay.
so then the next thing would be
Section 18 signatures.
Go ahead, you speak, Tanya.
Would you do a mutual release at that point then?
Yeah. I guess so. Section 18, this contract may be executed in multiple counterparts, each of which shall be deemed an original, but all of which shall constitute one and the same instrument. For the purpose of executing or amending this contract or delivering a notice pursuant hereto, an approved standard form or other written document which is signed and transmitted by any electronic method deemed valid in accordance with the Missouri Uniform Electronic Transaction Act, including but not limited to by fax machine, digital signature, scanned image, such as a PDF, email, is to be treated as an original signature and document.
So I was
What does
doing
that
the
have to
first,
do with
the
the
first
writers?
two want, the
But it
first.
says under riders, the following riders are attached and
Yes.
incorporated as part of this.
As a part of
That's
this
part of the
contract.
contract. That's all that
So
applies.
they can't.
They can't accept contract.
They can't.
But it says it's attached and incorporated.
I understand that. I understand that it says that. But the attorneys are telling us that they do not have to agree to the compensation rider. Why that makes it different, I do not know yet. Every day we get more information. As it stands right now, yes.
So, if the buyer then says, you don't wanna buy this property because you can't afford to pay you 2%,
Right.
or whatever. What instrument do they use to get out of the contract? That's been,
I would say there would have to be a mutual release, and the lender can then say, hey, they can't buy it if they have to come up with 2% additional funds or 3% additional
okay,
funds.
so a mutual release would be the next.
That's why it's always taking a chance to ask the seller to kick in more. You can always ask, but it doesn't mean it's going to be approved.
Wow, it just seems
Okay,
so shaky.
Here's how I look at it from a common sense standpoint.
No.
But if I received an offer like that, I talked to my seller, we like the offer, we don't like the compensation thing. It would, in the past, we would have countered back and said, this rider to be removed from the contract. And then that buyer and this agent goes, okay, well, let's counter back and see if they pay 1% instead of 2%.
Yes.
And we got an agreement put together. Then we have a deal. That's common sense.
That's right. Exactly.
What you're talking about
Who's
this
on the
is not common sense.
But the attorneys are telling us that they can accept the offer, but not accept well, and I guess that goes for anyone. They don't have to accept it. Right.
Then why do you have the word incorporated? Was the definition in the sole purpose of
Hey,
the word?
I'm not the attorneys. They put the rules. I just have to abide by them the best I can.
But you're abiding by some
But
rules, but not
with the
some.
wrong person, yeah. So I that's what I'm told.
That's Keller Williams.
Okay.
So what Rob is saying is using a counter offer to negotiate all of these
Right.
scenarios, because that can't be done.
They can do that.
That's what I was gonna ask, is Keller Williams able to do that?
It's so that. It absolutely can do that.
With, even with the compensation.
Yes, with it,
The counter offer can be used to negotiate these
Yes.
things out.
yes,
Okay, well, that,
absolutely. But I'm gonna tell you, you're going to run into, because the attorney put this out there, You're going to run into agents that think they know everything and the right way to do business, and they're gonna say, yeah, we're taking your offer, but not your compensation. It's gonna happen, I'm telling you.
Well, then I would politely ask the listing agent, say, well, do you mind putting that in a counter offer? So this is square.
Put it in
So
writing.
this is square.
We don't have.
Well,
to-
if that agent is working,
Again, you're arguing with the wrong person.
I think most agents would say, sure. I think most agents would say, sure, we can do that. You know what I'm saying? Because they would want to see why agents.
Yeah.
Have you worked for out with the northern bunch?
I was gonna say, that's like telling them not to check.
Well, Deb, you already know.
Two on the form.
You already know.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I understand. There's a couple agents that wouldn't do
I
that.
didn't know what if and how about, what do we do about this all day long?
I'm gonna try to
Because
get.
there's two scenarios that are gonna come up that I can't.
Okay.
So I actually have a question about the compensation agreement right
Okay. Okay.
If they decide, each seller decides, hey, we're not going to accept your terms on this page, there is no place for them to click or decide to reject.
Right.
They just don't sign anything.
Well,
Because then,
and like
you know,
I said, actually the common sense thing to do would be to counter offer the offer
correct.
and address it in that.
But with your other scenario, if they sign the contract but don't accept this and they don't want to counter offer, then how do we know they even saw this page?
Good question.
Because there's no signature.
Hey, I'm not the one that made it.
You can ask the attorneys.
You're on the board. Can you like move something forward?
Board has nothing to do.
No,
It's all over the mountain, come on. And antitrust and DOJ and
It's a good thing.
there's where common sense is left.
So,
Government got involved, all I can tell you.
So the question, if they signed the contract, but they didn't sign the rider and they didn't counter offer anything. So
Here, I'm gonna tell you the solution to the whole problem, and we don't even have to have this conversation. Take whatever the listing broker says they're cooperating with. Will not ever be a problem with the compensation rider.
well, yeah, I understand that, but just
So why are they using?
so then the buyer, because when the seller signed those contract is pending, so we under contract, but they didn't sign that. Buyer now stuck with the contract and they don't have money to pay the compensation to me.
They're most likely
So-
not gonna get their loan, are they?
Yeah, so how buyer now get out from this
They're
contract?
most likely not gonna get their loan, are they?
well, the buyer's just signed a buyer's agreement. They get.
Make that loan get right there.
Okay, so we're gonna hope that the lender gonna do it. Okay.
Yeah,
Otherwise,
again, it's all going to depend on, as listing agents, the conversations we have with our sellers and keeping them real and also informed about what really is going on. Because they all think it's now become illegal to offer that. Or a lot of them think they know it's become illegal to offer a buyer compensation. So it all depends. Not only are we going to be educating the public, we're going to be educating other agents. Believe me.
But you're also talking to your buyers. They've signed a contract with you that they will pay you a compensation.
I
So
understand.
they should already understand that
But
they're
it's
not
their
giving
choice
off.
not to look at properties that are not going to.
But not
And this contract that is now an allowable cost to the seller.
Yeah.
And to the seller concessions.
But it's not our choice. That needs to be made clear.
Exactly.
Because we're gonna get sued if we say,
So if we go back to them and say, okay, on 123 Main Street, they're not offering any buyer compensation, what would you like to do? Most of buyers are gonna say, we're moving on. Because they can't afford it.
Right. Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
Thanks.
All right. I knew that was gonna be.
That was fun.
Good job.
Do that again.
No,
Okay.
no chat.
That, source of compensation, line 443, seller or buyer. Sometimes that's gonna be both. If you're also charging the buyer a retainer fee, or you're charging the buyer a marketing fee, you have to mark that they're paying you. if they're not paying the co-broker or the about broker, yeah. If they're not paying the buyer broker compensation and the seller is, and you have to charge the buyer any other fees, then you just won't sell it.
Well, doesn't that look like to the seller, the listing agent, that the buyer's gonna be paying some compensation of that
And they
3%?
have all the right to ask you, well, what are the buyers paying you?
Okay.
What are they paying you for?
So we can say, well, it's a retainer fee, but it gets credited back to them.
Yes, yeah. And then it has buyers requesting seller pay compensation to or listing broker shares compensation with broker assisting buyer at closing. Compensation agreement writer can be used for this purpose.
And that's new.
That's the new writer we were just talking about. Okay? Licensing is buyer's limited agent, trends, and always designated. So if it's well, of course it's your sale, that's what it would be. It would be filled out just like that. There. And then acceptance on page 10, there has to be a deadline, there has to be an expiration.
Yeah.
Page 11 is your signatures.
Right, so
Only the buyer's signature has to be dated, the seller has to be dated and timed. Rhonda.
Back to the source of compensation on section 24.
Yeah.
This is an offer, so all of this compensation hasn't been negotiated out. If you have a buyer's agency agreement, would you check with the buyer? The buyer is compensating you at 3%, and then in line 446, the buyer is at requesting the seller to pay. Help me out.
I wouldn't check that if I've already had a conversation with the listing agent and they say, yes, we're paying a buyer broker compensation, no matter what it is, I'm probably going to agree to that amount with my buyer as long as it's not over. We cannot collect more than what our agreement is for.
Okay.
So let's say they say we're paying 2.5 and I have an agreement for 3. I'm probably just going to accept the 2.5 and let's move on, get it done.
But then you have to go back with your buyer's agency agreement and amend that.
No, not if it's less.
Okay.
Only if it's offering more. Let's say somebody offers a bonus. Well, no, we can't take that without going back to our buyer and amending our agreement if they agree to allow us to take that bonus.
Okay.
Okay?
is that also,
And we can't just make it open-ended. In the buyer agreement, we can't say, we're going to collect 3%, my opinion is going to be 3%, and then if there's a bonus, I want that too. No, we can't cover that. It cannot be
If
open-ended.
you're only getting
way.
2.5%, then
We can take less, but we can't take more than what
so
our.
you don't need an amendment to the buyer's agency agreement for 2.5%.
No,
Okay,
not if it's less than what our original agreement was for.
gotcha.
something a little different, if the seller's offering a floor allowance of $5,000,
That goes to the buyer.
right? So is
That-
there anything
that's
special about that
what
we have to do? Okay,
Yeah.
that's like in special agreements, that has nothing.
Yeah, that has nothing to do with our compensation. Right?
Okay. This is this somehow. So like 444. If you were gonna ask for the buyer to ask the seller for compensation, then you don't mark either one on 444.
Yeah, you would mark seller.
Okay.
If seller's only paying 1%, and then the buyer has to pay the other
And then-
2%,
And then that's why.
And then the buyer is asking
Maybe.
me.
That's why you mark the one below also. By marking the one below, you can also add all this to the special agreements, but be very careful if you're negotiating commissions in the special agreements. That's why we have the writer. You will be practicing law at some point, I guarantee you. Okay?
okay, so I got another one. Alright. So the seller is only offering a compensation of 1%. So I'm gonna, on line 444, I'm gonna check seller. But I'm not gonna check buyer because I'm gonna check 446 to try to get the other 2%.
That's fine, and then you're usually with the compensation agreement then.
So I'm not gonna check that buyer part,
Nobody's
but I'm
saying
gonna
you
check
have to.
446.
I
Buyer's
said check that
requesting.
buyer part
Yeah.
if they are in fact paying you
If,
If they are in fact paid a retainer fee,
okay,
or if they're paying a marketing fee.
okay. So in a way, if you're not doing the buyer and you're doing the seller and you're requesting 446 check, in a way, they have to reject this or counter this. Because that also is
All negotiable.
right, a counter or reject or counter
Just remember,
is also
nobody
negotiable.
has to do anything.
Even if you check buyer on 444, we check buyer on 6, it then states that. Because we do have a fee, so
Right.
we're always checking the buyer side
Right.
of that. But that doesn't, you don't have to not check buyer on 444 if you're just saying 446, the buyer's requesting the seller pay. That's the clarity for that right there.
Right.
And if they don't agree, they either reject the contract, the seller rejects the
Right.
contract, or the seller counters and says, no, we are not going to say yes to line
The seller doesn't
446.
have to reject anything. They can just let it lay and not respond.
Exactly, not respond.
And
But they can't.
then the
Well,
offer.
then there's a timeline on this.
Yeah.
By 5 o'clock, you got to,
Right. As I watch the clock on whatever timeline we put
Yeah.
there, we assume that it has expired.
yeah, well, I mean, that's logic.
Again, they
Yeah.
can pick it up 2 days later and say, yeah, okay, we'll do it now.
Heather, is what you're trying to say is they cannot bind you to a purchase because of line 446?
Yeah, if you do 446, they kind of have
signed
to
that
answer you.
contract.
No, they can't bind you to it.
So they sign it, let's say we have that writer, I know we're going
Right, right.
that writer, and they don't sign that.
But we all,
They signed the contract, they've really said, well, we agree that the buyer's, well, all it said was requesting though.
Yeah.
It said requesting.
but always remember, any part of the contract is totally negotiable until we have a meeting of the minds.
Yeah.
But then it does say form, compensation agreement writer can be used for this purpose, so if we attach that.
Yes.
They can't really sign that and not acknowledge the writer. I agree. They can't really.
They have to acknowledge something. Or let it expire.
Right. I mean, if they sign, what I'm saying is if they sign the agreement, say, hey, we.
Yeah, most likely you will not have any problems whatsoever if you just take whatever the listing broker says they are cooperating with. Because we can always be fairly certain the conversation has been had with the seller. Hey, if you're not offering anything, the likelihood of your showings being 1,000 are slim to that. Rather than 1 or 2. I mean, this isn't, it's all relevant. So hopefully they've had that conversation. Yes.
I think a lot of the confusion may be just because we use the same form for an offer as we do for final binding contract. Because when we have a request, that's like an offer language, but it's not like in a final contract. That's kind of weird because it's not just a request.
Yeah, it doesn't become a contract till everybody has meeting of the minds. Do the counter offers? What we're gonna look at next.
The meeting of the minds, though, is a final signature. So that means they are coming to the meeting of the minds of that compensation.
I know, I think it's just a contract. Other than that, it's all.
I understand, but when they sign the contract, that is the meeting of the minds, right?
Yeah.
That means you have a deal.
Yes,
That means they are accepting those writers.
if they sign the writers, all writers have to also be signed.
There's a statement for it. That'll be fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, that's the law. They all have to be signed. Why do they allow for a signature if they're just automatically
Yeah.
marked?
If there was no signature, then
All allow for signatures. You may change the terms of one of them.
Yeah.
They
I mean,
can
not
do
a
that.
counter. So
Yes.
Yeah.
The counter offer form. Big and bold. Any terms agreed to in a previous counter offer must be included in this counter offer, along with any new proposed changes. Only the terms contained in the final counter offer or this counter offer, together with the remaining unpaid terms of the contract, constitute the new offer. Okay? And I think it would place this a change. Alrighty, that's really all we really need to go over. The rest are just our standard forms.
notice of
that we've
additional
had
time
for a while. What?
Oh, never mind. The additional specials report. I've never seen that before.
You've never looked through the forms library?
No, with a billion to four, no, I've never seen you pull one of these out
Yeah, I
in
just.
2 years. Some additional forms.
Yes, pull one out this week.
See you.
Okay,
It's actually good to be seen.
any other questions?